Welcome to Mill History Talk, the podcast where we explore the past to better understand the profession of arms today. We dive into the campaigns, conflicts, issues, and commanders that have shaped military thinking across centuries and why it all still matters. Whether you're an officer in training, a seasoned professional, a student of strategy, or simply curious about how history informs modern warfare, this space is for you. Our mission is simple: to foster insight, reflection, and critical thinking primarily through the lens of military history. Before we begin, a quick note. The views expressed in this podcast are those of the podcast writers, hosts, and guests, and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any government agency or organization. So, whether you're listening in a barracks, a lecture hall, at the gym, or in your car on the way to work, welcome. We're glad you're here. Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of Mill History Talk, where we cut through the myths and get straight to the strategy behind the battles. I'm your host, Lou, and today we're taking on a bold, big picture book that might just change the way you think about World War II. The book, How the War Was Won: Air, Sea Power, and Allied Victory in World War II by Phillips Payson O'Brien. Now, if that title makes you think this is going to be just another stats-heavy analysis of bomb tonnage or convoy routes, hold up, because this book delivers something much bigger, a full-on strategic rethink of what actually decided the war. Let's break it down. First, a little context. This book was published in 2015 by Cambridge University Press. The author, Phillips Payson O'Brien, is a professor of strategic studies over at the University of St. Andrews. So yes, this guy knows his stuff. He's also written a biography of Admiral Leahy and a stack of work on air power and grand strategy. What's his main argument? O'Brien's central thesis is that the war was not won on the beaches of Normandy or in the ruins of Stalingrad, but in the skies and on the oceans. He says that Allied air and sea power, not ground campaigns, was the decisive factor in crushing the Axis. Sounds controversial? It is, but he makes a pretty convincing case. O'Brien lays out what he calls the air-sea super battlefield, a kind of strategic arena where the Allies could leverage their economic might, mobility, and technological advantage. He points out that the Allies poured way more resources into planes, ships, and related infrastructure than into ground forces, and that investment paid off. He walks us through how air and naval forces, working in tandem, systematically dismantled the Axis powers' ability to wage war. In Europe, it meant knocking out German fuel production and aircraft factories. In the Pacific, it meant cutting off Japan's merchant fleet until their war machines simply couldn't function. One of the strongest points he makes: once you can't move troops, fuel, or supplies, you're done. And that's what the Allies did, long before the boots ever hit the beach in many cases. This book isn't just opinion. It's backed up by deep research. O'Brien pulls from U.S., British, and German archives, wartime strategic plans, and a mountain of production and attrition data. But don't worry, he doesn't beat you over the head with numbers. The data's there, but he walks you through it in a way that's totally readable. Now, I'll say this: it's not an intro-level book. You should have a basic understanding of how World War II unfolded to really get the most out of it. But if you do, the writing is clear, direct, and even fun in that, oh wow, I never thought about it that way kind of way. One of my favorite parts is how he completely flips the script on some of our sacred cows. For example, the Eastern Front, important, yes, But O'Brien argues that Germany's failure to maintain air superiority was more decisive than any one land battle. And when it comes to Japan, he makes the case that their defeat was sealed once the U.S. had control of the sea lanes and could bomb their home islands at will, even before Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That said, the book isn't perfect. Sometimes O'Brien pushes his thesis a little too hard, downplaying the political or morale impact of land victories. And I wish he'd spent a little more time on the Soviet perspective. After all, they carried a massive part of the war's burden. But these are minor quibbles in an otherwise fantastic read. So, what's the big takeaway? If you want to understand how Allied victory really happened, not just the what, but the why, this book is essential. It's not about glorifying air power or pushing a single service. It's about understanding strategy at a grand level. Would I recommend it? Absolutely. Is it worth your time and money? Without a doubt. This is a must-read for anyone into World War II, military strategy, or big-picture thinking. Junior officers, historians, armchair generals, this one's for you. It also gives you something to think about in terms of what capabilities are really decisive and therefore worthy of investment when building a military for large-scale conflict between major nations. That's it for this week's episode of Mill History Talk. If you've read How the War Was Won, let me know what you thought. Drop a comment wherever you listen. And don't forget to subscribe and share with your fellow history buffs. Until next time, study the past, sharpen your mind, and as always, keep your powder dry.